Hello again. For this video, I want to talk about the last of the topics that I had given you for our literary analysis essay. Again, if you check out the literary analysis essay assignment sheet, you'll see 4 suggested topics listed there. By now, you should have already watched the videos on gender, protesting, and globalization. So this is the last one, immigration. So for this one, if we were going to be writing about this topic, we would be asking, what is the story trying to show us about the immigration system? Obviously, I think the story shows us that it's flawed. So we'd want to be like specific, like according to the story, like what are the problems with the immigration system? How is it a hurdle for people? How does it stand in the way of people trying to live their lives, of the women in the story trying to gain their independence? So I think that's one of the main ways that we've kind of already talked about it. I think when I did the video on gender, I talked about this with Mrs. Dorego, how if in order for Mrs. Dorego to get her independence, she or for her to not be dependent on her husband anyway, she would need her own green card, her own legal status. The way things are right now, she's kind of bound to the husband because she's on his green card. If they weren't together, I think her immigration status would then could become a problem. Um, Same thing for Eve. There was the whole thing where Mrs. Dorego was asking Eve for her passport so she can renew her visa, and then Eve gets this plan where, she has this contact of somebody in Mississippi who can possibly help her get a green card. So I think one of the things that we see about immigration is the way that like the legal status of these two women in the story is another obstacle to them getting their independence, to them, achieving the goals that they have in the story. We talked a lot about that, about how they have these things that they want to be able to do in their lives. And in the gender video, we talked about how like sexism or being treated unfairly because they were women was an obstacle to them achieving those things. And I think here we can kind of see how that also works with the immigration stuff. Okay, so I just want to go through a few quotes that I think give us some more specifics here and are, things that I would consider quoting or referencing if you were going to write about this. So starting on page 3, and the second paragraph of page 3, it says, in my first week, this is, Eve talking, right? She says, in my first week, I caught a flu so severe I wished for mere malaria. I sweated from fevers, headaches pounded my head. Mrs. Dorego worried because I had no health insurance. She treated me with lemon drinks and vitamin supplements. So I think the specific detail here of like Eve not having health insurance, not being able to go to a doctor, obviously there's a lot of people in America who that is the case for, but I think for Eve specifically, it has to do with her immigration status as one of the main reasons that she wouldn't be able to go to the doctor like this. Even though I kind of wonder because it says that she was sick and they treated her with vitamin supplements and stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't Dr. Drago a doctor? Like, he's really not going to grab her like some kind of medicine, like to, I don't know, make sure she doesn't get like really sick. He couldn't, get her some antibiotics or something. Um, but yeah, just like that, the idea of her having no health insurance. Um, there's also kind of a thing where like I forget where it is, but there's that one scene where I maybe should have mentioned it when I was talking about gender in the story. But there was that one scene where Eve describes, so she lives in the basement, right? And there's a time when she describes like she was coming out of the shower or something, and like Mr. Dorego like walked down the basement stairs like at the same time or something, and she like I don't know thought he was like being weird or something, and that stuck out to me as obviously a kind of gender thing as far as that goes, but also it made me think about how someone in Eve's position where her being dependent on them for her immigration status like creates the situation where if she were to be exploited by them in some way or experience some kind of abuse by them. I wonder like what kind of recourse she could really have. It's like, is she really going to go to the police or something? If the Doragos could be like, okay, well, we'll get you, deported or something. We'll deny your visa thing and like get you sent out of the country or whatever. Um, so that's an element I wonder about too. With Eve and immigration, it seems like the Doragos mostly treat her pretty fairly. It definitely seems like Mrs. Dorego does, but they did mention that. So on page 4, there's some quotes that I think we already talked about in a different video, but this is the children of the family talking to Eve. The daughter says, talking about Mrs. Drago, She's a doctor, but she hasn't got her papers, so she can't work yet. So just again, one of the main things it seems that is keeping Mrs. Dorego from achieving what she wants to do, which is to become a doctor, is her immigration status. And then this quote I know we read before when the son of the family says, "My mom really wants her papers because my dad is controlling." So I think that sentence, even though it's a kid saying it, I think it does a good job of kind of making the connection. Because when we looked at this before, I think we focused on like the dad being controlling, on Mr. Dorego as being into these old fashioned gender roles and stereotypes and stuff. But I think we see here a connection between like Mrs. Dorego wanting her papers, wanting to shore up her own immigration status, and the father and the husband being so controlling, like they said. So there's like a connection there where one of the ways for her to have more control over herself and not be so under the control of the husband would be for her to have her own papers, just the way that they have it there. My mom really wants her papers because my dad is controlling. Like that, she wants the papers. That's why she wants them. Is because of she, has a problem with how dependent it makes her on Mr. Dorego. So again, just the idea of how the immigration system is another thing, kind of in the way of the women in the story trying to get independence. So on the bottom of page 6, onto the top of page 7, we have Mrs. Dorego talking to Eve, and yeah, they're talking about the passport or whatever. Eve doesn't want to give it to her because she wants to, try to get a green card, so she doesn't want to necessarily renew her visa with the Doregos. So at the very bottom of 6, it's Mrs. Dorego. She says, "I just need to send off your renewal by tomorrow. Immigration is tough these days. Me, myself, when I came, I made the mistake," going on to page 7, "I made the mistake of applying on my husband's visa 7 years later, and I'm yet to see a green card. Everything is delayed since September 11th." So, yeah, so it's been 7 years that she's been trying to get a green card. And she says everything's been delayed because of 9/11. But, if the story takes place in 2003, that would mean that she would have applied in, like, 1996 or whatever. So, definitely before that. So I think that's one thing we see there is that like the system seems in the story, shows it to be very slow. Um, something, and if you wanted to write about this, you could do some research on it and look into like what the actual laws are, like how long it actually does take. I'm sure it costs a fair amount of money as well, but I think we see that happening there. So the next paragraph on page 7, right under where I was just reading, this is back to Eve narrating. She says she had just started a pediatric residency program and needs me to be at home with her children. She's hoping to have my visa extended. I can't tell her I am looking for a green card sponsor now. I am ready to work as a nurse. What will she say to that after flying me over to America? So yeah, Eve kind of lays out there the kind of tension between the two of them, the conflict of Miss Drago needing her to stay with the kids, of Eve wanting to leave and become a nurse on her own, and yeah, the immigration stuff is just bound up with all of it. So yeah, it's just similar to the way the gender discrimination is something that they have to try to like fight against and overcome if they're gonna become more independent and achieve the things they want to. It seems like immigration is kind of a similar force that they're gonna have to overcome here. I think that is most of the like direct kind of criticism that we see of the immigration stuff. It's kind of mostly in the background. Okay, another thing I wanted to talk about here, though. So we can think about what the story's saying about the immigration system. It's obviously criticizing it in certain ways. We would want to be very specific about what it thinks the flaws are with the system and everything and how it could be better and whatever, and then be specific about like the problems that it shows being created for people because of the way it's set up. Another thing we could think about here, though, is kind of I think the story also shows us something about like the perspective of an immigrant. Like with Eve as our main character, I think it's very important to the story that everything is from Eve's perspective, and she's the only character that has recently been in Nigeria and is also in America in the present. You know, like if Madam Queen was the main character, we would only have the stuff going on in Nigeria. If Mrs. Dorego was the main character, I don't know exactly how long she's been in America, but it seems like whatever. I guess at least 7 years or something, right? She's been in America much longer than Eve and doesn't seem to have the same kind of connections, or she doesn't seem to be always thinking about it the way that Eve is because she was there so recently. And for Eve, basically everyone she knows still lives in Nigeria. And it doesn't seem like that's the case for Mrs. Dorego so much. So yeah, I think with Eve as an immigrant being the main character, there's certain like I think it shows us something about that point of view and what it can add. I think the main thing we see here is that Eve is kind of able to see connections between like some of the luxuries the people in America are enjoying and like where they came from with the gas stuff in Nigeria. So like there's one quote. Let me see if I can find it. There's one quote where she's talking about yeah here it is. It's on page 6 where she's talking about the car that the Doragos have. Um, so it's kind of in the middle of page 6. She says the Jeep is as big as a hut with 3 rows of leather seats and a DVD player. I've heard people on television complain that vehicles like these use up too much gas. I wonder why they are built so large, considering Americans have such small families. Why they are so sturdy when the streets I see are flat and wide. The critics on television say that people buy them for status. They have no idea what status is. Nigerians given a chance would drive Jeeps as huge as mansions for show. But at least we have plenty of children to show for ourselves. At least we have appalling roads. So I feel like what Eve sees here is a connection between like the Jeep that the Doragos drive when they're a family of 4, right? They probably could have a smaller car that didn't use as much gas, but they have a big Jeep, and I think because Eve like grew up in a place where gas and oil was had such a negative effect on everything, but also where it's something that they were constantly thinking about. I feel like she sees the connection between like let's say it this way: if you just lived in America your whole life, if you never looked into this stuff, if you just whatever go about your life and don't really think about it, all that you see is like the end product, of like gas station, like gas in the car is driving around and everything. Unless you live somewhere where oil is extracted, which there are places in America like that, but you don't think about the pollution or kind of environmental destruction or kind of all the awful things, especially in the Nigerian situation, that had to happen for that oil to get to where it is now, for the gas to be going into the Jeep. So I feel like something else the story shows us about immigration, not so much about the immigration system, but just about the perspective of an immigrant, is that Eve is able to see these connections in a way that the other people in the story don't so much, or like the average person probably wouldn't. There's another scene, I think it's on page 4, when she's giving the kids a bath, and she describes like the shampoo or like raspberry shampoo that she's using, like giving them a bath or whatever, 'cause she's their nanny. Um, and as she's looking at like the soap and the water and kind of how that looks, it reminds her of something. It triggers this kind of flashback where she says in the bottom of page 4, and she goes into it saying, "In my hometown, we had rainbow-colored water. It tasted of the oil that leaked into our well. Bathing water we fetched from a creek. This smelled of dead crayfish. Our rivers also were dead. When rain fell, it rusted rooftops, shriveled plants. People who drank rainwater swore that it burned permanent holes in their stomachs. Our roads had potholes as big as cauldrons because of the rain." Um, so yeah, again, just like like I guess kind of luxury that she sees in America with the Dragos and their big house and the hot water that comes out of the tap and the indoor heating, right? Because I think it's winter in the story, so like the heating inside of the house that is probably run by natural gas and stuff. And I think for her, she can't like think about that stuff without also thinking about what it's like in the places where these resources are extracted, like her hometown and just how it's been devastated by oil and everything. So I think we can say, if we're talking about messages here, if we're thinking about possible arguments, I think we can say that the story is critical of the immigration system, that it shows us how it like keeps people from gaining their independence. And I think it also shows something about like the perspective of being an immigrant, like I'm saying. Okay, so I think that's kind of what it is with this topic. If you were going to do this, like I said, I would definitely do some research about the system itself and how it works and what you have to do and how long it takes, and kind of the consequences for people who are kind of in limbo with their immigration status who live in America, because that's part of the thing for Eve too. Like one of the reasons that she would be afraid to try to go out on her own and like do the things that she wants to do is because if something goes wrong, her immigration status can just get like fucked, and then she can be liable to get kicked out of the country. So it's something that it seems like keeps these women dependent, keeps them from trying to branch out and go after like things that they want to achieve. All right, I think that's it for this topic. See you soon.